Asa. Okay. Asa?
Yes.
Asa Galloway.
Asa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future with a more sophisticated approach.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Today, I am so excited. One of the people I get to interview, and one of the coolest things about having a podcast is folks that you've been watching forever. You almost feel like you know them through virtual relationships. I get to interview the Funky Academic today, and I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation that you're going to enjoy. So without further ado, I want to bring him on. He is a public intellectual, philosophy major, and has some of the sharpest and I think more nuanced and deeper public commentary than you're going to find anywhere else. So without further ado, let me bring on Irami Osei-Frimpong. Did I say your name right? I hope I did.
Yeah, Irami Osei-Frimpong. You did just fine.
Nice. So I wanted to start off with kind of establishing a baseline for our audience on a couple of things. And so because we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy topics, things like race and political theory. First one, it's kind of like a wild card, maybe just answer quick, but race, a social construct, yes or no, and why?
I mean, yes, it is, insofar as black people weren't really black until we came to the United States, insofar as we're, different tribes and different origins and different religions. So it's a social contract, but so is like money and property and marriage and what counts as, a spouse or a family member. These are all social contracts. So it's not as if it's meaningless because it's social. It's we imbue meaning to it, and our meaning's real, and our meaning's passed down from generations to generation, and that's how we live on in our, in meaning and memory and other people. So insofar as it lives on and it affects how we govern our lives, it's social but meaningful. It's actually more meaningful than biological constructs, right? So biologically, I have bad eyes and I'm balding, right? But I think my race is more important than the fact that my eyes aren't so great and I got the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar / Clyde Drexler balding pattern going on in
That's
the
why
back.
I got this hat on, man. I'm balding too.
Yeah. So, but so just because it's a social construct doesn't mean it's not meaningful. In fact, it's more meaningful than other biological determinations. For example, my height.
This is exactly what I mean about you having a really sharp wit, because people like Charlie Kirk, try to play the social contract stuff so he can front like he's not negatively, talking bad or, dehumanizing folks. All right. So the next one kind of just, again, I only have two of these, just kind of fast, setting the ground level. Recently you did an episode I really loved about your reaction to the No Kings protest. And you talked about, for instance, Nancy Pelosi is essentially like a mini monarch because she doesn't take debates, and she's just essentially in office until she decides to retire. And then on top of that, of course, there's all these, what there used to be the Twitter accounts where you could follow her trades, to make money. But what I wanted to ask you about that is you also describe yourself as a leftist. And I'm thinking that for most Americans, this left, right, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, it's almost meaningless now because it's so can you give a description of what you mean by leftist? And then we'll get into some deeper stuff after that.
Okay, so about the No Kings protest, I think it's important that it's really hard to get rid of Nancy Pelosi. It's really hard to get rid of James Clyburn. In a robust democracy that's like resplendent with self-determination, we would be able to, as a people, decide who our representatives are. But we can't do that because Nancy Pelosi doesn't submit herself to a debate, right? And in the vacuum of without a debate, it's kind of like that, was it 2000? I think it was 2005 Saddam Hussein election where he was elected, there was a ballot, yes or no, on it. And would you believe that in 2005 he got 99% of the vote, right? So it's just as hard to get rid of Nancy Pelosi or James Clyburn as it is to get rid of a Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. It's actually easy. We figured out a way to get rid of Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. Not the best way, but we figured out a way. We can't figure out a way to get rid of Nancy Pelosi. Just because the way our democracy is structured and the media architecture and the inability to make the parties less than cartels. Like the Democratic at that level, like Pelosi's seat and James Clyburn's seat, that's just as rigged as anything in OPEC or like any sort of cartel governance. So we're at the mercy. We are at the mercy of the Democratic elite, especially when you look at someone like Feinstein, who was brain dead when she was elected, but we couldn't say anything about that, or we couldn't we couldn't contest that with a debate because the Democratic Party has a policy of not making its elites debate.
Yeah.
So that's structurally disenfranchising the rank and file voters from making a choice. And in the absence of a debate, by the way, the only reason we're dealing with Mondami right now in New York, the only reason he has a chance is because he got to stand toe to toe with Cuomo and contest ideas. That's the only reason we know who Mondami is, because when they're on the stage taking questions, Mamdani showed who he was. He had the opportunity. Without those debates, Cuomo wins. And I don't know if that's controversial, but I'm pretty sure that without those debates, Cuomo wins. Forget the viral marketing or whatever. It was all about the toe-to-toe answers on Israel, toe-to-toe answers on his vision for New York, and having them on stage at the same time. Pelosi won't do that. She didn't do that to Shahid Buttar 2 years ago. She's not going to do that to Shoikat Chakraborty this year. And without that forced debate, we need to think of these political parties like public utilities and just regulate them. And because they have privileged access to the ballot box. So
what do you think
right
about things like ranked choice voting? Because that's one of my top priorities. In Colorado, we almost had it, and then our so-called Democrat liberal with the libertarian streak Governor Polis nixed it at the last moment.
Ranked choice voting would be nice, and public financing would be nice. I want to start with the debates. I want to see what happens when Pelosi has to defend herself against someone who wants her job.
Yeah, someone as sharp as Mamdani too, right? I mean, that guy's quick on his feet.
Yeah, but Shahid Buttar is too, and so is Shoikat.
Yeah, Shahid is amazing, man.
And then there's a guy who ran Marcus Dixon, I believe. I forgot his name. Anyway, he ran against James Clyburn. No, we could, if they could have a chance to make their case in a media environment that had to listen to them, we could have the challenges, and I think we could vivify our democracy. So I want to see what happens when Pelosi's forced to debate a Shahid Buttar, when she's forced to debate Shoikat Chakraborty, and then we'll talk about maybe we need to even more think about the conditions of a contested election, because right now the media can't cover primary challengers because they can't risk the access of losing Pelosi, right? So you cover Shahid Buttar, you cover Dixon, you cover Shoikat Chakraborty, all these challengers, and what'll happen is Pelosi's office will just cut you off. You'll never get anything from Pelosi's office again, and so that kind of constrains our democracy. And so if we're serious about self-government, we need to actually expect our representatives to debate in public.
Well, and this is why I asked you to kind of define what you mean by leftist, because, for instance, you often use the term that you're America first, and I do that too. I kind of add the S on America, because it's the people. I put Americans first. Because, dude, I'm a bald white guy, and my mom's Mexican. No one can tell by looking at me unless you're Latino. Every now and then, people are like, hey, But I don't want to walk into a room as a bald white guy with a beard talking about. So what I'm trying to get at, though, is could you talk a little bit about how you define leftism? Because I feel like for this conversation and people to follow along, they need to know where we sit.
Okay. So there's going to be a tripartite distinction I'm going to draw real quickly between conservatives, liberals, and the left. Conservatives will say, we need to look at our traditions. We need to look at our history. It tells you what works. We don't know why it works. We're not going to think too closely about it, but it works. It's why it accounts for our greatness now, and anytime we deviate from it, problems happen. So just look at what has worked over time and just go back to that, and that's what you should hold on to. Don't ask too many questions about it, because it's inscrutable. We can't know what it means, right? Yeah. Liberals will say, forget the fact that it worked in the past. It doesn't mean that it's what I want right now, and I'm living my life right now. I should be able to pick what I want right now and do what makes sense to me right now because I want to do it. And don't ask me to justify what I want. I want what I want. and I happen to want it right now. I want to marry you right now, and I want to divorce you tomorrow. That's my business. I want to have sex with you, and then I want to abort the baby. That's my business. I get to do what I want when I want to because I want to, and that's what freedom is: being able to do what I want when I want to because I want to, as long as it doesn't affect you on terms that I decide.
You're about to sound like a Muslim because you say this a lot about how freedom comes sometimes from constraint. I think, is that where
Yes,
you're
it
going?
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. It does come from constraint because that life is horrible. You can't
Yeah.
sustain families. You can't sustain churches. You can't sustain. Everyone's a flake. And
hmm
if you've noticed something since we were young, like the epidemic of flakiness, I feel
Oh God.
like is more because people just have no compunction about it. In a way, I remember the first time as a young man. Since this is a podcast, I can just kind of talk.
Yeah, just
As
be
a young
yourself.
man, I remember the first time I was stood up. It changed my life. The first time I was stood up for a date, I was like, I do not want to live this way. I was 22 years old. Her name was, I'm going to not say her name, but yeah, I like, we had a plan to meet someplace, and this is in the time before texting and beepers and all that. Well, maybe not in the time before beepers, but in the time before texting where like you had to make plans and then show up at a place where you had to do a thing. And she just didn't feel like showing up, and I felt some sort of way about that. And that gets written large in a liberal world where there is no accountability for being able, like, for your responsibilities to other people if you don't feel like doing what you said you were going to do.
It's
And
even
anyone who
infiltrated
actually
the
holds you
workplace
accountable.
nowadays.
What's up?
It's even infiltrated the workplace nowadays. The amount we tolerate at work for people that, like, my wife's in education, and
Right.
like the amount of stuff that teachers get away with, it blows my
It's
mind. Like,
atrocious.
they turn it
Atrocious.
on themselves instead of being for the students all the time. It's craziness.
And like, I'm surprised everyone didn't figure out that game during COVID when nobody knew this Zoom school was working for nobody.
Right.
And the teachers kept getting paid and pretending like it was work. So yeah, so this lack of accountability and responsibility that liberals call freedom,
Mhm.
it's really degrading. It really degrades all sort of relationships. Forget your relationship to the divine, but your relationship to your spouse, your relationship to your kids, all in the name of some sort. Like, it really stigmatizes freedom in a way that's not great. So the conservative alternative to that actually looks attractive. Because when people see themselves like divorcing when they want to, not taking responsibility for their kids, not taking responsibility for their jobs, not taking responsibility for like their lives, like saying, "Oh, porn's not that big of a deal, gambling's not that big of a deal." What else? Like, it's haram. That's just like crazy in the country. So in the face of that kind of liberalism, like, these conservative values start making sense, even if they can't be justified, and that's a problem. And the lack of inquiry and scrutiny is a problem. But in the face of like liberalism, I'll take the black box of conservative ideology, of something that works, but we don't know why and we can't ask questions. Like, that's going to be more attractive than the epidemic of flakiness and licentiousness and libertinism that liberals will do, and just the lack of like unable to accept and take and take accountability and responsibility seriously. Like, these teachers moving kids in who can't read, just moving them through, and without actually like stopping and saying, like, I know they can't read. We need to stop and talk about this because this is unacceptable. Like, I can't fix it this year, but I'm going to tell you what the problem is, and like, it's not going to go away until we fix it. And I'm not going to continue like taking this check to teach these kids how to color. Because we don't want to teach them how to read, or we can't, or we don't have the resources, or it turns out that the system we have right now was never going to work. We just didn't know before. And so if teachers were more honest, at least, and got rid of Randy Reinhardt.
Interrupt you something, because when I was doing my
Yes.
master's, I got a master's in civic leadership, and I had
Okay.
really great professors, and one of them
Right.
comes from the Black church, and her mom's a pretty famous pastor in Nashville. I went to Lipscomb University. That's a Church of Christ school of all places, so a Muslim
Oh,
went to a Church of Christ school.
my wife is a Disciples pastor, and Disciples
nice.
and Church of Christ are really close, if you don't know.
And
But yeah.
and so where I'm going with this is they talked about, before integration of the schools, that Black education was superior
Yeah.
to after. And this leads me to one of the questions. You still haven't really defined leftism for me, so I think we'll do
No,
that
I'm
along the
about
way.
to get there. I'm
Okay,
about to
then let
get
me
there.
get
Yeah.
back to that,
Yeah.
and then I'll ask the question.
Right. All right. So the conservatives said, let's do what works. We don't know why. The liberals will say, let's just do what we want because that's what freedom is. And the leftists say, like, actually, no. We need to actually think through the institutions that create meaning in our lives and justify the ways in which freedom can be expressed. There's a certain kind of freedom you can have in a marriage that you can't have in a market relationship where you just kind of take it and leave it. You can't just return your wife, or I can't just like upgrade my mom. And there's a reason for that, right? And there's a certain kind of way you can be with those people because it's not on the market. And there's a certain kind of way you can be in a market that you can't be with, and that's a kind of freedom that, like, it's good to be able to return things you don't want. It's good to be able to like get a newer model, right? But when you start mixing those kinds of ways of being in relationship with people and things, that's a problem. That's a problem. Like you shouldn't be upgrading your spouse like it's a phone, right? And you shouldn't be slavishly tied to technology that like isn't working for you as opposed to going to the upgrade, right? So like you need the right kind of relationship with the right kind of being, right? The relationship you have with your employer is different than the relationship you have with your spouse, which is different than the relationship you have with your property, right?
Exactly.
And this can be justified. Like I do a lot of work on Hegel. I'm doing a dissertation on Hegel and no-fault divorce. And because I think no-fault divorce is a kind of child abuse, because this idea of 50-50 custody is just based on bad metaphysics of a person. You don't split a person 3 days a week. And this idea that you can be a parent but not see your kid for 3 days and hate the other parent so much that you can't even ask the other parent what happened over that 3 days, where like the kid, you live in a black box where the kid goes off for 3 days and you don't know what happens, and they're with you for 3 days and the other person doesn't know what happened, and the only person who actually knows what's going on in the kid's life is the kid's therapist because they get both sides. So it's just a normalized child abuse that like that we haven't really
Institutionalized child
thought through.
abuse, even
You said ritualized?
institutionalized.
Institutionalized, yes. Institutionalized child abuse. We talk about 50-50 custody as if that makes sense. As if we can literally, like splitting the baby, I thought we decided wasn't great, right? So, like, it doesn't make sense. That's not, like, all that does is it's a practically enforced schizophrenia, where you pretty much force the kid to live two lives, and you end up raising a nihilist.
I know you're a hip hop head because your older shows used to have MC Breed and that song
Yeah.
"No Future in Your Frontin'" as your intro music. I grew up
Yeah.
on that same era. And I was telling you before we started recording, I'm an army brat, so like I have this weird mix of Americana culture, being on a base in Germany, in the '90s, and just still having a love for hip hop. There's a guy you should check out. His name is Brother Ali. He's a Muslim rapper,
Okay.
and he has a song that literally talks about this, about being a divorced child, and how like you get to look at two families when the parents move on, but neither of them's yours, and you have no place to go.
Okay, there you go. That's it. And we just need to take that seriously. So my dissertation's
Exactly,
on like, I'm not trying to ban no-fault divorce. I'm just trying to say that like it's bad. And before we do it, we need to stop pretending that it's some sort of benign arrangement. It's incoherent, and it's forced practical incoherence on the kid's life. And like you say that the parents have irreconcilable differences, but then the kid has to reconcile them. So like there's a way in which you're putting a burden on the child that you guys have just like washed your hands of. And now you've made it a you problem. You made it a child problem. You figure out how to work out our inconsistencies because we can't be bothered to. That's what the parents are doing.
100% consistent with what you're talking about with the whole liberal idea of freedom, where you could just wash your hands of everything.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
just for the Muslims, I can hear him right now in the audience. Tell them about Islam, and like the Prophet Muhammad allowed, peace be upon him, a divorce between a couple where it was an arranged marriage, and the wife couldn't stand the way her husband looked. Like she was physically repulsed by seeing him. But this is before they had children too, right? um, and then he also taught that divorce is the most hated allowable thing by God. So like,
Okay, that I see. That's something I can
get behind,
hated
right?
and allowable. Yeah, right. That's what I want. I don't want to put people in jail. I just want to really stigmatize it, and hopefully towards not keeping people in bad marriages necessarily, but making people more discerning and thoughtful about what marriage means.
And especially the role of being parents. I mean, parents need, kids need a stable household, and if at all possible, with a mother and a father.
I think that's going to be the defining the defining feature of the next generation, like how seriously your family took family. Is because like the difference between families right now in America is monstrous, monstrous. Like the
So
difference
can you dig
between
in a little
family
bit on
culture.
that?
Right. Well, because I think when we grew up, my parents are boomers and we're about the same age. I'm
Yeah.
48. Wow, I turned 48, so you might be a little bit younger.
Well, I'm 2 years older than you. I'm 50.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go. So our parents, with my mom, she just figured that, well, if as long as I make money, she was a nurse. If as long as I make money, I don't have to actually like be with my kid, right? The best way, because she grew up like, not with a ton of money. And so she was like, well, I'll work 3 to 11. And if you don't know, that's when kids come home. So I'll work 3 to 11. Like, and I'll make enough money. And since what kids really need is money, since I'll make enough money, my kid doesn't need a father. So she split with my dad. And then my kid doesn't need any more like non-market direction. So pretty much I was raised by television.
Yeah, me too.
The Fall Guy and all those shows that came on TV when I came home. And that was like the direction I got as a kid. And that wasn't great. First of all, my sister could have used my dad. I could have used a dad. But the idea that close directed study and like wasn't necessary and that the market will take us all, like almost worked in our generation. That's why they call it latchkey kids or whatever. You were just raised by television. Mm-hmm. Almost worked. It didn't quite because, I'm not particularly functional. But it almost worked, but it didn't. Now with this next generation, they're bound into the algorithm. That same sensibility that like, well, I'll just let the schools and the and whatever is in the market raise my kid. They're abandoned to the algorithm. They're screwed. Those kids are cooked, especially relative to my kids. And I am actually teaching my kids like directly stuff. My kids beat those kids in everything, not just math and reading, but also sport. Like everything that matters, my kids can do well because I teach them how to do that stuff well. And if your parent isn't in the game, like I'm in the game, like your kids will lose to my kids on like a lot of things. And I don't want black kids to lose to my kids. I want my black kids to be colleagues with my kids. But for that to happen, there needs to be a kind of cultural shift and cultural control that needs to happen in ways that we're going to get to later. So let me just talk about leftism. My leftism comes from the idea that the government needs to step in and actually create policy and create norms and create laws which allow for these different distinct kinds of freedom, right? Okay. So we need something that actually secures good families, because just because you didn't get raised in my household and that your parents didn't like your dad and mom didn't read all the books that I did, it doesn't mean that you should be screwed. It means that we need a program to get your parents up to the job. Like we need a program to teach your parents everything that I know, so that you're not degraded because you didn't grow up in my household. That doesn't mean the government teaches your kids. It means the government strengthens your family, right? Okay. So, and that's the same way I think about the government's role in strengthening labor policy, right? I don't want a UBI. I don't want the government to give you money, but I want the government to give you a good unionized job, secure you a good job that will also get you off in time for you to volunteer at your kid's school and coach the soccer team and all that stuff. So I that's my leftism. I want the employer of last resort should be the government. And what needs to happen? Well, I'm in the South right now. You said you're in Colorado?
Yeah, but I'm from Texas originally. I lived in Tennessee before I came here.
Okay, so you go around this nation, that there's like 60 years of deferred maintenance.
Yes. Oh my God. Mm-hmm.
To be done. So we could put people to work. We
Yeah,
could
I'm
get
all
these
about
class size.
infrastructure policy. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. We could get class sizes down to 3. Some people need it to be down to 3. We could just do it. Like we could put people to work and just pay them to work those kinds of jobs. Get class sizes down to 3. Put fiber everywhere. I start talking about this, and people are like, "Well, what if you're talking about make work jobs?" I'm like, "No. If I go about an hour and a half in every direction except towards Atlanta,
Hmm.
like I don't think they have very good internet."
That's true.
Like,
Yeah.
if I go in out, I don't know. Like people assume that everywhere has great internet. That's not the truth. So like where you are has great internet, but does every place? If you go an hour in every direction, do they have great internet where you are?
No, in fact, it's funny because I did my master's in Nashville, and
Right.
the whole thing I was doing was a way to kind of blunt racism. And this is a very quick aside.
Right.
I have a friend, he runs a program called Black Nerds, and he goes into the inner city schools in Nashville, teaches robotics and programming. And so I
Right.
was like, what if we did that, but in Appalachia, the mountain countries that never see anybody but, like farm workers? When
Right.
we get the white kids, do it in the firehouse or the church, and then have like a woman in hijab or, a guy named Hakeem. Uh, they'll never meet anybody, but they're the people it
Right.
teaches like them Python. And then there's no DEI, there's no like, it's just straight up, mentorship for a job. And then these kids, get a
That's actually
certification,
a good idea.
right? And then you blunt racism because you target like 10th graders when they're the most rebellious, so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
their dad could be as racist as they want, but it was a black woman or a Muslim guy who gave them a job. All of a sudden, they're going to be like, hey, people are
Not so
people.
bad. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
So
actually
this
not
this
so
goes
bad.
right in
But
line because I had to actually reach out to EDX, which is like an online education platform, and
right.
I was asking them to give me rights to teach their online Python certification in person because the
Okay.
internet is so bad in some of these places in Appalachia.
Yeah. So like we assume that we have a nation with functioning infrastructure, and
Right, so far from it.
we don't. We don't. It's just the people like who make Netflix shows all have functioning infrastructure, so they assume that everybody does. And so we lose the culture. So there are places where the government can step in and secure, for example, debates.
Right.
You run political primaries. You run political parties as if they're public utilities, so they can still be distinct from each other, but some of the internal workings have to like meet a threshold. So you have the equivalent of an SEC that makes sure that like they have contested primaries and that everyone has access who's a party member because these parties have privileged access to the ballot. So there should be some sort of conditions that we put on them, or they'll be run like cartels, which we see the Democratic Party being run as. And so that's when my leftist aspect comes in. The market won't solve these problems. Just accommodating people's wants in the moment won't solve these problems. The government needs to step in through the right processes to figure out how to secure these different institutions of freedom. So I believe in public policy. I believe in private property. I believe in entrepreneurship. I believe in families, and I believe in religions. I just think the government has a place to secure these spheres, and that you can't reduce all of these things to private property, right?
So then by inverse, the right is just kind of very libertarian in your mind.
Well, liberals are actually very libertarian in my
Yeah, that's
mind.
actually, I didn't want to say it.
Like, yeah, liberals are actually like libertarian in my mind. They just don't admit it.
Mhm.
And there's a feminization of American liberal discourse, which is like not great, and that's not true because there's nothing wrong with actual like females.
Yeah.
There's a peculiar kind of American womanhood that came out of colonialism that has taken over the Democratic Party, and a lot of there's a peculiar kind, not universal, it's not founded in biology, it's founded out of the needs out of colonialism, where we had to make women both highly esteemed and also useless. So they had to be valuable and useless so that they could be protected. And then because you had to protect women, that's how you go legitimize like the violent policing of anybody who's not of the colonial race. Right. So there's a very peculiar historical, cultural, like commitment that goes into American womanhood that is trash and is everywhere, because it emerged as a reason to police violently any threats to that womanhood. But it means that now anything that's overly feminized becomes unaccountable. Hence, public education.
One of my favorite moments, and one of the reasons I really started to dig deeper into your channel and the content you're putting out, was you were on, I don't know if it was back on the Hill days or not, but you were with
No.
Crystal Ball, and you were talking about this. And then you essentially said, Crystal, you are exactly the biggest threat that I have in the world because you're a white woman.
Yeah.
Do you remember that clip?
Yeah, well, no, Crystal's great because you need, like, I said Crystal's best book, if she ever got to write it, the only book that she could write that would matter is how she went from like basic white Clinton Democrat to someone who invites me on her show.
Right.
So what happened to that? Because that's what needs to happen to America.
Yes,
because that's what needs to happen to America. Because some people will listen to me and say like, he's misogynist. No, I actually believe in like equality. I just think that we have a culture that has a hard time holding women accountable, and there's a reason for that. Like historically, because the way we've organized our gender had to like serve a racial project.
Exactly.
So we have a hard time taking women seriously and holding them accountable. And I think that's a bipartisan consensus. Now, I was listening to two paleo conservatives, Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, talking about how, we don't hold women accountable, but that's okay. Nick Fuentes says that's not okay. They should, we can't hold them accountable, so they should, just kind of shut their yaps and just make me a sandwich. And Tucker Carlson says, we don't hold women accountable, but that's adorable, and we should just understand that as part of one of the perks of being man is that we love this inscrutable, unintelligible feature that is woman, and it's just so cute, and we just need to appreciate their cuteness. Although, of course, we can't take them seriously.
You hit on something. Go ahead.
So let me finish that. These are two paleo conservatives who think this. Mm-hmm. I think that ethic goes through the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party runs from accountability because they don't want to have to take women accountable. They don't want Nancy Pelosi to debate. They think it's cruel to expect Nancy Pelosi to debate. They think it's cruel to expect Randy Weingarten to actually take challenges. They think it's cruel to expect Dianne Feinstein to be able to utter a complete sentence. And and if you press it. If you press them, if you press it on it, it'll retreat the gender. And this is what happened with Bernie and Elizabeth. Yeah. It was cruel to say that Elizabeth Warren was lying when she obviously lied about Bernie Sanders' sexism. So this inability to hold women accountable is true of both paleo conservatives and the Democratic mainstream no kings crowd who and I worry that the GOP is going to win just because people are tired of taking advice from women who are bad at the job and not being able to say you're bad at the job. Now,
Kamala Harris. Hello.
Harris.
She stands for nothing, would poll test in the middle of a campaign, and then we ask she couldn't differentiate herself from the person she inherited the last race from, and then we're how did she not win?
She was always a bad candidate.
Yes.
She was always a bad candidate. I'm from California. See, I knew Kamala Harris as, isn't she the DA who got her job for sleeping with Willie Brown?
That's from what I heard.
California. So that's how I knew her. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
That's just how it was fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. And then she was such a party hack. She just kind of kept rising. She kind of had a little bit of a contested primary with Loretta Sanchez, but not really. So she just kind of kept rising through the party and nobody ever actually testing her. And then when she was a nationwide candidate, she was polling she was a horrible candidate in 2020.
She dropped out before her own race to avoid embarrassment. I mean, come on.
Yeah, she would have lost California by a lot.
Yes.
by a lot. So, but nobody can talk to her about no, she was just a really, really, really bad candidate, a monstrously bad candidate. And And then there's this weird thing that Democrats are so bad about women. Because I think I have this theory. I haven't tested because there are some good Democratic women that have. I think they've been aborted. I think like Hillary Clinton aborted, like left any like smart woman left of her in the 2000s and 2010s. And a little bit of the 90s. I think you weren't allowed to be left of Hillary Clinton then. And so like any smart women who would have actually done it, like were starved. we're left. Like this is why we don't have Zephyr Teachout, for example, running for president right now. Zephyr Teachout, I think Zephyr Teachout's great, right? Like we should have like 12 of her. But we don't. We have a Kamala Harris instead. So what happened to Zephyr Teachout in 2004, 2005? Because I think the Democrats decided that we can't risk women left of Clinton. And so like that screwed up like an entire generation of women who could be great left leaders, but aren't. And they like because their careers were handicapped in the 2000s. That's my theory on it. So my leftist comes from the idea that government needs to step in and secure these institutions of freedom, but keep them distinct, right? You secure families, right? The government doesn't raise your child. The government secures your family, and then the family decides how to raise a child. So
again, this comes really, in a way, I think very aligned with like what I'm thinking for instance, is the American Muslim faith community. We often, because we don't have a lot of intellectual leadership when it comes to politics right now, our history, like we ping-ponged all over the place. Bush Jr., back pre 9/11, sold our community on he's going to protect our civil liberties of all things, right? And so we endorsed him, like just to even really remember that is devastating. And then our community spit down the line because of the genocide in Gaza. This one, with a huge chunk voting against Kamala, and half, parts of that going to third parties for the Greens, parts of it going to MAGA. But then we had well over 50%, vote Democrat. And it's because we don't have this political philosophy, and we often like get bamboozled by right wingers who hate us, but they use us for like political cover. So for instance, like school vouchers, they'll come to the Muslim community and be like, here's a way you can send your kids to Islamic school. But then if we help them get the voucher system going, what they're going to do is call all the Islamic schools Sharia organizations and ineligible, right?
That is the truth.
Yeah,
look at that multi-dimensional chess. I didn't put that together. I mean, you've been thinking about this longer than I did, but you are 100%. That is exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get this big, beautiful Islamic school, and as soon as the wrong power gets into that's going to get targeted for all the hate crimes.
And it brings
me to ICE and
a fun question I wanted to ask you. And if you don't want to talk about it too much, that's cool. But what's the appeal of Thomas Sowell? Like, I know white people appeal. I know why they love him, right? But I see people that, from the African-American community that quote him, and I'm just like.
So we're starved for cultural leadership because we don't have, cultural leadership takes infrastructure. We could do this podcast, that's fine, but how big is the distribution going to be really? Exactly. I mean, we need some sort of spiritual infrastructure, and we don't have, there's no Black Haggadah. And I don't know if you've seen my show on the need for a Black Haggadah and how the closest
Not
thing
yet, but I will.
to a Black Haggadah we have comes from the Nation of Islam. Actually might be Malcolm X's autobiography. That's the closest thing we got to there's no spiritual unity. This is an externally imposed identity where we all kind of have the same struggle, but it hasn't been internally organized. By the way, if you don't know what the Haggadah is, if your listeners don't know, it's the series of prayers that's said over a Seder where Jews come together and they tell the story of where they came from and what that means and who they are and who they're not. And how who they're not going to try to get who they are, and this is how we're a people, and this is what we owe each other, and this is who we are as a community. And don't get yourself confused and think that you can be somebody outside of this community. You're it's kind of a spiritual revival that happens every year, and in a little way every week, where Jews remind themselves who they are through this practice. There's no Black Haggadah. we are not on the same page. We don't know who we are and who we're not, and we'll all disagree about who we are and who we're not. So like we don't. There's no spiritual unity to our ethnic identity. It's all like it's all we've. It's what's there's a phrase for evolution when it happens in it happened because of similar pressures but in different parts
Locations.
of in
Yeah.
different locations. So we all have the same stressors. So so we're all affiliated and like kind of conceive ourselves as black or like oppressed or like in a very particular way, and we all have the same symptoms, but there's no like unity spiritually. It's all the symptoms were like all of the pressures were externally imposed, so it's no like internal development of the black identity, and like they couldn't let that happen. Like,
course.
like the American Project couldn't let that happen. So there's a reason why there's no Black Haggadah, and the closest thing that there was the NOI, and the NOI got captured. But like at least he was trying to tell a story of Black people who told him who they are and what that meant, and in a way that like we need a big. And in the absence of this spiritual unity, like we can't make a sustained campaign for reparations because not everyone's on the same page about who we are and what we need and the damage that's done.
You brought me exactly
So
where I wanted to go with the next question, but please
yeah,
finish your thought.
no, that's all. So I hope
Okay.
I explained my leftism. I think the government needs to step in and secure these things, not leave it to the market, the liberal market that's a little bit flaky, and not leave it to an unexamined tradition. But actually, the process, like the government can actually, we step in, we decide through open and public processes, like how we secure people good jobs and secure them good families
I
and
think we're a lot
contested
more
elections and all
aligned
that stuff.
than I
Yeah.
initially anticipated because, like, I when I was younger, I flirted a lot with libertarianism because I love civil liberties, but then I just realized it was all one big thought experiment and it never was designed for the real world. It's like you have to have perfect conditions. But I grew up in Germany, seeing, like 90s Europe and the way that was structured, the way they had strong social safety nets. Before the reunification of Germany, a woman gets pregnant, she gets 2 years of full pay, to take care of her children, maintain the family structure. But the government didn't come and tell her how to manage her children. They just gave her full
Right.
pay so she could do it.
Right.
And I kind of feel like right now the best thing to do is like look at the Netherlands and maybe splice in a little bit of what Japan's got going on,
Yeah.
for how to kind of build a society because it's scalable. Um,
Yeah.
but where you brought up reparations. This is one of the big things I wanted to talk about. And before we hit that discussion, I wanted to talk a little bit about how, in your mind, communities with a lot of internal diversity can overcome that as a challenge. I have this book to the left of me over here. It's called Us Plus Them, and it's by a Harvard professor named Todd Patinsky. And essentially, the book boils down to he essentially says that in the English language, we have empathy, but we don't have like empathy plus as a word, where it's like empathy kind of builds into it a paternalism, where it's like, oh, poor thing. You kind of look down on the people, right? you, it's like it's almost like you can feel bad for them, but you're not
Right.
going to respect them, right? And
Right.
you're not going
Right.
to realize the beauty they bring. And so he says that us plus them, you have to learn to celebrate the other without, and that takes a lot of self confidence, right? Like to look at another culture, another community, and look at what's beautiful about them, so they can contribute, and you're not being paternalistic. So where I'm going with all this is like often communities fall into, the quote unquote oppression Olympics, but
Right.
so much of the stuff you said that the black community faces, I think anyone who's been colonized faces those same
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So do you have some thoughts on how to, without being a racial, like I'm often seeing myself flirting with economic reductionism and taking race too far out of the picture because I want like universal policies that will help everyone. The rising tide,
Right.
lifts all boats. Uh, so maybe you can help me think through how to bring communities that have a lot of diversity amongst themselves together.
I mean, it's tricky, right? Because you're talking about a bunch of people without money, so they're dependent upon white women.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So like, I'm growing more and more skeptical of coalition politics in general, just
Uh,
because like a coalition of the poor. That sounds like a great idea, but everybody's strapped and has debts and is easily turned. And then a coalition, the only people who have money who would be somewhat sympathetic are white women. But then it's just you all end up just running on their priorities. And then you have a coalition of the poor with the priorities of white women, which is like, kind of like that's the poor people's campaign right now.
Yeah.
Right? like the poor people's campaign that's feckless because Barbara does, or even the entire Democratic Party, which isn't really serious about jobs, race, or even gender.
At this point, I feel like it's just controlled opposition. I mean,
yeah, because it's run by like very professional class white women who just feel bad, and they feel bad right up until they stop feeling bad, and then
and that's when it affects them personally.
yeah, and then they just turn into conservatives because they know where the money's like coming from. So, like I'm kind of not coalition politics. We live in a material world where like people having money matters for our politics, and it needs to be like coalition politics will work if the material is diffuse. If like everyone has a say and there aren't these weird dependencies, so I don't have to worry about making Miss Nancy cry, or worried about like Kamala Harris or Miss Nancy
getting all up in her
cutting me off or
feelings,
anything like that. Yeah, and
I
then
mean,
same. I mean, this is our
her
problem
new
with
book
AIPAC in
essentially
general.
is like why I feel bad for not winning and why you should care.
Yeah. I don't. You were never for us, man. So, like coalition politics, you have to solve the money problem. You have to
It's
solve
so
the money
interesting
problem.
you say that. On Saturday, I was at a big convention in Houston. I brought in
Okay.
to moderate a panel on politics, and one of the imams said that, money is the mother's milk of politics. And I really loved how he said that because it's so true. But the thing is, some of the targeted communities are pretty well to do. I mean, the whole campaign about Stop Asian Hate, there's parts of the Asian community that are at the upper echelons of American society. You have Muslims who are some of we have our refugee communities that are strapped for cash, but we also have, immigrants who came over here with an intact family history, and they may have came very poor, but they've risen up very high and fast. And they are really just truth be told, having aspirational whiteness syndromes, and they don't
Well,
understand that they're going to be targeted really quickly.
it's not just aspirational whiteness syndrome. For a while I thought that all the South Asian Hindus in the world were vegetarian. That's what I thought. I'm from California. I was like, every Hindu I knew was vegetarian, every Indian American. It turns out I only knew Brahmins. It turns out I only knew Brahmins.
And they're on a very
Which
specific
means
part of the cast. Yeah.
it's a very specific part of the cast. So I was like, we're all people of color. No, these are Brahmins. They have a 1,000-year history of treating other people like garbage. It's all like in the culture, and it's been like it's through an evolution, a cultural level, it's been refined. And so like just the idea that if you take all of the people, all of the Southeast Asian immigrants who come to the United States, and then you mix them with all of the Cuban immigrants who came to the United States in Miami, and you and you mix them with all of the people who fled the Shah in Iran in 1980, somehow you get them all together, and they're going to be liberal. They're going to be left. No, you took the biggest assholes like in the world history with like the strongest culture of domination, and just because they're not white, you assume that
Yeah, exactly.
like they're on the side. No, you have Brahmins, like the people who treated Afro-Cubans like trash, and then you have like the Shah of Iran's people who not the most justice-loving Iranians. Iranians coming together in America, and these people are not going to be cultural leftists.
That's how you have
even
Marco
material
Rubio.
leftists.
I mean, you described Marco Rubio to a T.
No, and or like even like someone told me that like 2% of China has a college degree, but and I think that number's gone up a little bit more now. But 50% of Chinese immigrants in the United States have a college degree. So like we're not like we can't assume that everyone's on the same side. We can assume, or even if you're like my dad who came from Ghana, like he owns like in Ghana, right? So we need to not just assume that there's a cultural unity towards like one American self-government as opposed to just coming to the United States to get rich
Exactly.
among recent immigrants because a lot of people left places to come here to like get rich, and the best way to get rich is to treat poor people like garbage, which is lucky for them because a lot of them have 1,000-year history in the culture of how to treat poor people like garbage. And so assuming that like the Brahmin Indians going to like organize a labor union with you, that might not happen with the Felicity. Well, by the way, this is one reason why I really want to actually sit down and have like a Negro to Negro conversation with Sharma Sawant over in Seattle, because she's the socialist city councilman over in Seattle. Because I think she's the real model minority. She's the real model minority. Yeah, no, we need like that. I want her like, because like she is like, we need that. We need to turn all recent minorities into her and figure out how that happened. And that would be interesting. Instead, we get Kamala Harris, right? So, we just need to think about what we're really unified around, and then who would control the conditions of our spiritual unity. I've said before, and I'll say it again, and no one's going to believe me, but Rashida Tlaib would be the strongest candidate in 2028. I thought she'd be the strongest candidate in 2024. People have to get over their like, I don't know, whatever knee-jerk reaction they have. She's good, man. Rashida Tlaib, she's good. She's not perfect in all things, but I think she's a very, very interesting, I think she's about our age, interesting, moderately young woman. She could like, I like her. I like her. And
my theory is that Democrats are learning all the wrong lessons from Trump. And the example I'll give is Gavin Newsom. When he launched his podcast, he was like leaning into the fact that he's been accused of sexual improprieties and all of, like just that he's a colossal jerk of a human being. And so instead of, Trump's example was you don't apologize for anything and you lean into it. So, like when they talked about him doing tax evasion, he's like, I know how to game the system. I'm smart. And then everyone who is poor, who hates the system goes, yeah, so he understands his audience. Where I think the only person doing it anywhere close to right is Mamdani, because he leans into his Muslim identity saying, I ain't apologizing for Jack. And I'm bringing it right back to making New York affordable.
Yeah. A little bit of the guy from Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah, he leans into it.
But I wanted to shift this over because we're about 45 minutes in.
Nobody from the left can do it because they're scared of ticking off the wrong people, right? And
that's Kamala Harris. The reason I think she was the nominee is she's beloved by especially tech, but big money interest. Also, your Chase.
Same with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg, like nobody's going to vote for Pete. Nobody's going to vote for Pete Buttigieg. but like the Democratic Party is now going to put on a big psyop telling you that he's electable, just because they're controlled opposition, right?
And so he learned how to have a cadence like Obama.
Right, and he's got the right cadence. So Gavin Newsom's big, like, why he's relevant is because of his Newsom nuptials. I think he did a great job in 2005 when the country was anti-gay marriage. He's like, screw it, we're marrying them in San Francisco. Now, it's a big gay city, so it's not like it's not popular in San Francisco. So it's not brave in that way, but it was still kind of brazen insofar as it was clearly against the law, and he clearly did it anyway. And like that's the one reason why he could have like spine, but he just doesn't believe in any of the right things.
Exactly.
So, except for that, like he doesn't believe in any of the right things. And my big thing is that Democrats are so bad on family. They're so bad on family that the nation's gonna just go to the GOP. Like
I would love family to be a huge electoral political issue.
Yeah.
But Do you think young people who are traditionally unreliable voters anyway, but do you think that that's something that motivates them? Because I keep seeing all these trends that people aren't even getting in relationships anymore
They're
because
getting
of
into relationships because
the
because
whole hookup
they're
culture,
not
right?
getting into relationships because women are terrifying. They're not getting into relationships because women are terrifying. They don't want to end up like my dad, who ended up dying in his condo.
Mm,
Like after
I'm sorry.
his wife divorced him. All these, yeah, I mean, like women are terrifying, and nobody's making them not terrifying except for the conservative right, which is a problem.
Well, they're doing it in the
So
infantile way, yeah.
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 So that's why they're not getting married, because nobody wants to be married to a flake who then now you can't tell is a bad parent. Because how do you tell liberal women that they're bad parents, right? Like, and that's part of parenting, telling your spouse that like they're not doing it right sometimes, right? So like people aren't getting married because women are an ordeal to deal with, and it's because we don't have a culture that tells women to like actually you got to think about other people, and like duty's a thing and responsibility's a thing, and we don't have that culture among the feminists. And if I talk like this, I get called a misogynist, which is once again why Crystal Ball deserves an Atta girl, because I can talk like this to her, and she'll still, although not lately, invite me back. So I appreciate that, like, there's a growing
No, Krista's
consciousness.
fantastic. And the thing about her, what I love about her is like once she understands facts, she doesn't care. She's going to put it all on the line and stand up for what she thinks.
Yeah,
Um, and we need that's what we need. Like you said earlier,
that's
if
what we
we could
need.
turn the DNC into crystal ball, that would be fantastic.
No
Um,
problem. But like that's not gonna like. I really do think that the Democratic Party's problem is like we don't know how to talk tough to white women, because they have all the money. It might be their dad's money, it might be their husband's money, but they have all of the money, the discretionary money. So like we just don't know how to talk tough to them. And then the ones who are married to them are scared of their wives. So like nobody's talking tough. Nobody's talking tough to them. And if you talk tough to them, they'll just divorce you and call you an abuser. I suspect Katie Porter's husband, ex-husband, has some stories about Katie Porter that would not surprise me at all. And you know what about Liz Warren? I know I talk about Liz Warren too much. What happened? Like, she's got a weird history. Like, she was married, then she followed her husband down to Texas. Her husband put her through law school, and then she like upgraded and divorced him, and then got like a better husband at Harvard. Like there's a or not, yeah, something. Like there's we don't know how to talk tough to women on the left, and the only party that does know how to talk tough to women and they do it on the wrong way is the right. And like I think, and I've said this before, I don't know how your audience is going to take it. If the era of feminism I grew up in, where we just assume women were right about everything, which is pretty much how I grew up. Single mom, I just assume, and like, vaguely liberal, I just assumed women were right about everything. And that worked until they just kept being wrong about everything without any like pushback. And like if women were great, if democratic liberal women were great at family, if democratic liberal women were great at building businesses, if democratic liberal women were great at running the Democratic Party, like we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. The problem is they're not great at it, which is fine. They also won't take any adjustments, which is not fine. And a bunch of nice guys who just happen to be born guys are tired of like having to pretend that bad advice isn't bad advice, and going to college and learning that they're the problem with everything. Although they've been beaten by girls every year of their lives at school, and depending on the school, probably have a woman professor. So, like those guys are just like either checked out of politics or be like, I'm going to give Fuentes a chance, or like they're just going out just because like on the left, in the middle, liberals and the right don't know how to like say to women that like you're not right about this. You're not right about this. We can work it out. See, I'm not a conservative. I'm not one of those guys who thinks women are stupid. I actually think women are my equals, except we have a culture that says we can't actually treat women like equals. Like,
Thing is, I feel like I have to chime in for
right,
conservatives a little bit when it comes to
right,
social conservatives, not political
right,
conservatives,
right,
because
right,
like as Muslims, like the way we look at it is that men and women are equal before God, equal in value, all of that. And Islam actually 1400 years ago guaranteed women property to own a business, right to an education, inheritance, initiate divorce,
right.
all of these things. Um, and then it put this extra burden. You're not going to like this part on men,
Yeah,
where like men are responsible for, like my wife makes more money than me right now.
right,
And if she didn't want to, I would still have, if she didn't want to contribute Islamically, it would be my duty to take care of every bill for the family.
right.
So the money she earns is hers. She can contribute to the house or not. But the thing about, I think, conservatives is uh, your paleo conservatives, like you were talking about Fuentes and Tucker Carlson.
Right.
I think they do want to go make me a sandwich kind of wife, right? But
Right.
I think
I don't.
real people who care about the family, they understand they need a strong woman as their spouse. They want someone
Yeah.
intellectually competent, committed, and like you said, that when they make mistakes, hold themselves accountable, not even having to be held accountable. And I think Muslims are teaching young men, the ones that don't get red pilled and caught up with your Tate type of movement,
Right.
um, that a strong woman is the Prophet Muhammad said that a good wife is the biggest blessing in this world.
Oh,
Um,
it's a huge deal. It's a
yeah.
huge deal.
So like I think we're kind of calling for the same thing. And I mean, if YouTube channels like Shoe on Head weren't so popular, people wouldn't be able to say, like people would just go, oh, the funky academics anti-women. But there's cracks in the matrix everywhere on this issue.
Well, yeah. Well, it's just obvious that the idea that you have to defer to women's opinions in all
Mm,
aspect of life without the appropriate pushback is not great for our institutions. Like it hasn't worked. It hasn't produced, like it's produced a lot of not great families, hasn't
right.
produced great politics, and it hasn't, and especially in America where this will default to like professional class women,
Mm,
and it turns out they don't really care that much about labor politics. They
right.
don't really care that much about like unified families. They don't really care that much about like making sure black kids can read. So just letting them go unchecked in our politics isn't equality. That's like it's inequality, and it's not particularly effective inequality. Like
Well,
the only demographic that's actually made a great last 40 years is that class of professional class white women. Everybody else has taken a hit.
yeah, they
Um,
even benefited more from DEI than people of color. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
statistically, yeah.
So
So
I'm
now that we've kind of talked
I'm a
about
real
how
feminist.
terrible the situation is, and you poo-pooed on inter-community coalition building,
It's
um,
hard, man.
yeah, it
Like, how are
is.
you going to do it without media distribution?
But
How do you do
if
it
you
without?
have time, like if
I
I could
don't own
magically,
Paramount. Larry Ellison does, and
yeah,
he just gave Barry Weiss a job. I don't.
mm,
I don't own Paramount. Like you don't own Paramount. We like that matters.
yeah, we're reaching thousands of people where they're reaching millions of people. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not the type that can just give up. I mean, like I want my
Right.
kids to inherit a better future. And
Right.
I think the midterms represent an existential crisis for the American Muslim community in particular, because I think everything Trump does, I think Trump is literally Steve Bannon's useful idiot. And I think Bannon is hyper intellectual, just like Nick Fuentes, and has a plan and has been moving people and has to actually probably is more stressful and hated in Trump than any of us because he keeps the faux pas that, like make Bannon's thing harder to do, you know. But like the whole thing of Trumpism to me is you throw out a crazy idea verbally, like I'll be a dictator for one day, and then you do all these little things. So it's all normalization and making us comfortable with stuff. And I think what's happening is, you attack the worst of the worst, and then you attack illegal immigrants, and then you attack brown people, and then you go to black cities and you put
Right.
troops on the ground and normalize, like martial law. And then when they really want to get serious, I think they're just going to blame everything on Islam and Muslims and attack our community.
I mean, I think that's true. I think that's true to an extent,
Uh,
And the wealthy Muslims will get a pass. Um, that's true to an extent. What the problem is, it's already in the culture, right? So what Giuliani did into New York in the 90s,
Mhm.
there wasn't really an ideological pushback against it. There wasn't really an ideological. We didn't have to do it that way. He just threw everybody in jail, cleaned up the city, did it that way, and there wasn't really an ideological pushback. People just woke up 5 years later and things were a little bit cleaner, and a lot of people were disappeared. And he did that, and there wasn't an ideological pushback. There wasn't like, we can't grow this way. There wasn't like, that wasn't the concern. So Trump saw that. He's a New Yorker. Like, he saw that, and that's why he can do the same thing to Chicago, to DC. Like, he can do it. He can do it because we didn't figure out why it was wrong when Giuliani did it to New York in the 90s.
Not only that, but
And
Giuliani became America's mayor and got all the credit for cleaning up New York.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so, like, he laid out the blueprint that, like, and we didn't push back against it. So Trump knows that in the American culture, we already have a narrative to make sense of this kind of martial, ridiculous, like, this kind of violence, this kind of, like, state-sponsored, like, terrorism. We already have the cultural, like, infrastructure to accept it. Now he just nationalized it and put it in strategic places in a Memphis, right? But we didn't have a pushback, an ideological pushback against it 30 years ago. So, like, it's not
We don't
clear.
have one now.
I don't think we have one now. I think there are too many
You know where
people who are kind of comfortable with the idea of rounding up everyone who they don't like and just disappearing them and
Too
not
many
asking too
people
many
are
questions.
comfortable with punishing the people they don't like. They're like cheerleading from the side for the cruelty. And I blame all of this on the Rainbow Push Coalition and Jesse Jackson, because once MLK got murked, once Malcolm X got
Right,
murked, there
right.
was a due fear, of course, for inheriting their movement, because these are real change agents and they weren't
Right.
going to survive. The next one was going to get murked too. But I feel like the civil rights movement overall, and please school me where I'm wrong because I'm not
No, no,
well
no,
read
no,
on
no, no.
this.
Keep going. This is good. It's
But
gonna be
I
good.
feel like what they did is they leaned into shame just to shut down debate and to ostracize people. And all that did is it made everyone stop thinking and confronting their own ideologies. And then they took it all underground and they became martyrs for their bigotry. And then Trump comes out and normalizes it, and that's why we see it on steroids now. Because decades of shame never challenged the beliefs. It never made people become better. The national dialogue just got shut down. And so now we're in this stage where we literally, because we stopped talking to one another, we stopped making each other fight intellectually about what we thought, we're here. And
Well, yeah, that makes sense. But that means that the solution's going to come through more contested moments of people. Like,
yes.
so, like, here's what Nick Fuentes did right. He took on the right. And this is
Mhm.
what Trump kind of done right too. Like, he took on the right, and people accused him of infighting, but actually he just knew that he needs to take on the people on his side before he can be taken seriously as a contender against, liberals and the left or whoever he's fighting, right? So, like, I think people on the left need to understand that our real enemies are the Nancy Pelosi's, and that doesn't mean kill them. No,
Of
that
course,
doesn't
of
mean
course,
kill them.
of
No,
course, yeah.
no, we don't like that. That also doesn't mean wait until they die of old age, which is some people's solution. Because
Oh my
they have
God, the Ruth
reproductive
Bader
rights.
Ginsburg memes that keep popping up. I'm like, she refused to vacate her seat and handed Trump an extra SCOTUS. I mean,
That's so irresponsible. That's so
every
irresponsible.
time I see it, it almost annoys. I'm not from Colorado. My wife is,
Right,
so I have like
right,
vicarious native status. But in Colorado, there's this phenomenon that says Colorado native because everybody's
right.
moving here. And I just want to put a separate magnet that says, "Oh, you mean born here?" Because it's like they're co-opting nativism. They're like what it means to be a
Yeah,
native
yeah,
person. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, that's
But
true.
this is
That's
exactly the
actually
same. I get so frustrated when I see these Ruth Bader Ginsburg memes everywhere. I'm like, she did y'all in. She wouldn't give up the
yeah,
power.
right. And, like, we need liberals, we need
Yeah.
leftists who say, like, actually no, weed is bad. All right, Colorado. Like, I don't want my kids' classmates, like, on weed. Like, I don't want my kid on weed. I don't want that stuff around. Weed is bad. Gambling's bad. Like,
I was
like
so proud of
marriage
my
is
son.
good.
He's only 15. We went to one day we stopped on the way to school, and I wanted to get him a bottle of water because he left his at home. And we went
Yeah.
into the gas station. And he saw the lotto thing, and he's like, "Dad, why do so many people buy this?" And I was like, there's a saying. It's called the lotto is a tax on the stupid. And then the lady working the register started laughing. And then I got in the car with my son. He's like, "Dad, thank God I'm a Muslim because gambling is haram."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's a place. There's a place. Like, yeah. I mean, whatever it takes to get you through those first 20 years without any bad habits.
Yep.
We need to support, or at least be open to. Right.
Where I think you talked about
So
this.
whether the LDS have the word of wisdom,
Yeah.
the Muslims have the Haram, and the Jews have Deuteronomy, black people have nothing because it was targeted and taken out by the American government. So we never actually developed our own internal code. So now we just pray to the market algorithms in a way that I do not feel is great.
This is something that I think we can use as a transition to what, and I hope you still have time because I really wanted to talk about
Yeah, a little bit of time.
reparations.
Let's go.
Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like the AME Church, which is
Right.
where my wife grew up in, um, and I feel like it's such an interesting phenomenon because when you go to a service, it feels very much like a Black Baptist church. But you look at their, theology; it's an amalgamation of, Episcopals and others because they were locked out of any other church if they were Black.
Right. Right.
Um, and it seems like that's kind of the last vestige. It's almost like your NOI, but not NOI because the cultural weight that being AME has, right? And the generational thing with like Jack and Jill and all these kinds of things. And so,
Almost, but like it's still been it's still compromised.
for sure,
It's
for
still
sure.
compromised. It's
But
not. It's like an HBCU. It's the last vestige,
yeah,
but nobody gets. There's a reason why people don't get radicalized at an HBCU.
mm,
It's whatever comes out of there. It's Spelman doesn't produce radicals. And we like to pretend it does, but it doesn't. It fires them. Howard Zinn lost his job at Spelman. W. Du Bois
huh.
lost. Yeah. So, um,
Well,
I think that the black church is still a product of America insofar as it's the church that lived because it's the church that the whites let live.
yeah. So this is where I kind of wanted to get into reparations because if like, somehow I could just be like the emir or the leader of American
Right,
Muslims when it comes to politics, my tier one thing would be reparations for the
right,
descendants of freed slaves.
right,
Um, and the reason why, there's estimates from 1/4 to 1/3 of
right,
African slaves were Muslims. But
right,
also, I feel like there's a direct tie for like what's happening in Palestine right now to what happened to slavery. But most importantly, what really got me on board with reparations was two things. One, the 40 acres and a meal promise. But then more recently, studying epigenetics and how, people who've found PTSD see the same symptoms in their children, or, Holocaust survivors have trauma that they didn't experience. And of course, slavery was chattel slavery in particular was such a brutal system that there's epigenetic markers of this coming in. Um, and so one of the things I think about when it comes to like making this viable, like how would I get, uh, the 70% of the Muslim community in America that's not African American to get on board
right,
with this, is to try to do a justice narrative, but then also to challenge the faithful part of the Muslim community to live up to their values for being a community that benefits others. Um, and this is where I was so kind of devastated with your talking about how all the communities are too separated to really work together. So I'm throwing out a lot there, but I think the first part is if you were going to talk to a Fox News viewer, what would be your best case to make them go for reparations?
families. Well, as long as black communities are vulnerable materially
Mhm.
and culturally, they'll be used by the worst Democrats for democratic rule. Right? Like there is no autonomous black voice in America. It's run by white Democrats. So if you want democratic autonomy, if you want more democratic Republicans, you need to allow black people to say no to white Democrats because right now we can't afford to. We
Yeah.
can't afford to. We literally can't afford to. They write our checks. All those
Not only that, but
nonprofits are
Hakeem
like,
Jeffries has videos of how he's teaching the APAC people to groom black leaders.
yeah, yeah, and APAC, not APAC. What's the first something first? Birthright.
Yeah, the birthright is.
Um, yeah, Birthright Israel, and there's a similar group that takes kids from HBCUs and indoctrinates them to I'll send you a link and indoctrinates them in Israel and then sends them back and they get to feel like big shots because they went to Israel on this dime. And
Oh,
so
my
like
goodness.
there is no count. We need to counter that. And until black people have autonomous funds and property and standing, they're going to be flattered and suckered and bought because they need money into like all of the wrong narratives and becoming and supporting all of the worst Democrats. They can't even support the Democrats they like. They have to support the Democrats Nancy Pelosi likes because they're scared of like ticking off Nancy Pelosi because we don't have autonomous money, right, or property or anything like that, right?
Hence
So,
Clyburn's role in getting Biden up front to
right,
surpass
right.
Bernie. Yeah.
Right. So we have to support the institutions the Democrats allow us to support because we are dependent on the worst Democrats' money. Right. So if you want us to not be dependent on the worst Democrats' money, you need to support black families being autonomous. And if you do, you know what? A lot of them will come over to being Republicans because they don't need the Democrats anymore. And they don't need to be nice to the Democrats anymore. Because
And
right
they'll
now we
be
need to be
attracted
nice.
to the family values.
Yeah, and yeah, because they're not like we need to be nice to Democrats. Right now, I'm in a position where like I can't really go work at like a conservative place, and then I'll just get kicked out of any department with too many feminists because I have the idea that like maybe the idea of cultural womanhood in the United States isn't really accepting of like accountability in the way that it should be. And that's already assuming enough because to be a feminist in the United States is to be a gender studies scholar that assumes that men are wrong about a lot of things. And that's too bad. So like if you want autonomous black people who might become Republicans, you need to figure out a way to secure the conditions of black autonomy because until that's done, the worst Democrats will continue to use black vulnerability against both black people and Republicans.
And they're using all minorities against Republicans
Yeah.
that way too.
Yeah.
One of the things that I run into a lot when I talk to the immigrant portion of the Muslim community about reparations is they kind of do a slippery slope argument that a lot of white people do. Like if you give black people reparations, then all of a sudden you're going to have to give land back to the Indians and Native Americans and all this stuff. But what I loved is a recent episode you did where you mentioned Aisha Muhammad's book, A Framework for Reparations. Can you give my viewers just a quick overview of that and then some concluding thoughts so I can respect your time?
Okay, so we're Americans, right? So
Yes.
I mean, I think we have to start thinking about land back and other issues, but that's a separate issue. We're talking about Americans, and I'm a guy who believes in borders. I think the Americans need borders to figure out how we're going to be Americans for Americans, and that allows other people to be other people for other people. And without borders, you end up with a big empire, and this becomes Rome, and we don't want that. We want America. I'm an American first leftist. I want Americans to come together to figure out what it means to be American. And if the Canadians don't agree, that's fine. They're over there on that side of the border.
They do their thing.
Right. Which is they can do their thing. That's fine. But I want the right to be able to do our thing and figure out what the our means without the interloping of Benjamin Netanyahu or Macron or any of them. I want Americans to figure out what it means to be America. So that's important. And black people are Americans. We are Americans. And, I'm a African. My dad came from Africa. But I was raised by my mom in LA. So people can poo-poo my lineage claim all they want. And I'll actually accept that and appreciate that. And if people say like, all right, we can have reparations, but no reparations for you, Irami, I'll say, thank you. That's fine. I'll take it.
You should
Because
have
like
a
if every
50%
black
claim,
person,
right?
what's up?
You should have a 50% claim. I mean, like I want my kids to get their 50%.
Hey, look, if every other black person with four, grandparents who like grew up in Jim Crow, and if that like got reparations, my life would be so much better. Like it's so like I did have advantages because my dad didn't come with the same sort of like trauma and baggage as my mom's side of the family. So like if they
Sure.
want to use those advantages to get me out of the claim, that's fine. Then get everybody else in the claim. And
Exactly.
that
Okay.
still like is great for my life. That still is great for my life as Americans because their vulnerability now still gets used against me and my family. And so like I want them to be made whole because when they're
Exactly.
made whole, we all can be made whole as a we,
Mhm.
without anybody looking in anybody else's pockets because everyone's ass, which I think is great. Right. So black people are Americans. So this is an American debt. And America did a weird thing where it made the black problem, made America's race problem a black problem as opposed to America's problem. So this whole idea that black people need to do it themselves, fix America's problem. Well, black people didn't make America's problem. America made America's problem, and America needs to fix America's problem. And black people like are not in a position to fix America's problem. America's in the position to fix America's problem. So you need like a national project of fixing America's race problem, which happens to disproportionately affect black people. Yeah. It's not like black degradation isn't a black problem. Black degradation is an American problem. And there's just been a lot of propaganda into convincing other Americans that it's not an American problem.
Well, and the thing is, and a lot of the civil rights leaders have said this, that essentially the oppressor ends up suffering because of his oppression and loses their humanity as well.
Yeah and no, but like
No,
they
no,
have
of
nice
course it's not the
things.
same thing. I didn't mean to come off like that, but like,
No. Yes, but like, there's this idea that like Trump feels bad or
oh
George
no,
W.
no, no, no,
I don't
no.
even think George W. Bush killed so many people. He doesn't feel bad.
I don't think he
He
loses
sleeps
a wink of
fine.
sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't
No,
like.
what I mean is like, for instance, like look at what Israel did to the Palestinians this last 2 years, right? In
Right,
response to the attack. Um, you have a ton of people just throwing the similarities between the Holocaust and what happened in Gaza, right?
right.
And they are similarities there. It's just you have to be honest. So
Yeah, no. I mean,
you
it's
don't
not
want
even
to
hard to find.
become the things that you hate. And I think people who are actively oppressing other people run the risk of losing their own humanity. And again, I don't want to shed any tears for that because they're oppressors. I'm not saying that at all. But what I was picking up off of is that if America solves its race problem, America becomes stronger. That's the whole idea. Like we're all in the same boat
That I
together.
think so. I think that's true. I think America, but some people are going to have to take a haircut,
Oh yeah.
right? Like, there's a lot of ways of life
Mhm.
that are built around or presuppose black degradation. The suburbs, or like there are a lot of just ways of life that presuppose that black people should be treated like trash, and to a certain extent, like Latino Americans. I'm from California, and like California, anybody who's ever like even like I didn't know white people mowed a lawn until I was like 25. Like, California wouldn't last 7 minutes without Latinos.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
was like it would like seven. Really, if Latinos just stopped in California, like that the nation wouldn't 7 minutes max. Um, like like white guys haven't worked in California in 2 generations. In
You
L.A.
ever see?
and
Have you seen that new
especially L.A.
movie called Eddington?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, so it's set in I think New Mexico,
Right.
and it's about essentially the COVID time, and it has
Okay.
a sheriff versus a mayor,
Okay.
and then a buildup of an AI center all happening at once.
Oh.
And then they really dig deep into the Black Lives Matter movement, but they do it because it's this tiny little town that talks
Yeah.
about how
Sounds great.
one of the reoccurring themes, it's such a good movie, I just watched it the other night, um, is you have all of these like white kids that don't have a real identity that are out doing the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you have them confronting like a black cop in the small town and like, why aren't you on our side? You got to check it out. But the
Yeah.
reason I bring it up is I feel like when you were talking about like kind of the Karenism of the DNC, um, like Nancy Pelosi with her kente cloth kneeling down with Chuck Schumer, um, I think a lot of times when America deals with race, we do it in this kind of self-flagellation of the white identity. Um, and I feel like that's just performative and it's not helpful. Like for
No,
me,
it's
I'm half white, I'm half Mexican. Again, I'm very white presenting. I don't really feel like I carry white guilt with me, because like I feel like that was, my last name's Galloway, and Joey Galloway is a famous football player, and he's black. So I'm someone with my last name probably owned slaves somewhere down the line. But at the end of the day, like I live my life striving to make the world a better place, more just. And
right.
I feel like people, this this idea of going towards guilt or performatism is such a good way to co-opt progress. Can you speak to that a
Yeah,
little bit?
yeah. Well, it's not particularly productive.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think there's like productive guilt and productive shame. People should feel bad about doing bad things, and they should understand that like everything that they
touche.
are isn't what they've done.
Yeah,
Sometimes some things that like you do get inherited. Like we have inheritances
yeah.
for a reason, and both cultural inheritances and then we also have inherited degradations.
And we have a
Like
racial caste system in the U.S., so there is privilege.
well, and it goes down to even family structure. I tell black people that like you should have had better parents. You should have had,
Hmm.
and you would have had better parents. Your parents would have been more calm. Your parents would have been more resourced. Your parents would have been more creative. Your parents would have possibly even been more loving and more patient with each other and with you. And America took that from you. And we need to understand that if you did have parents who were all of those things, they weren't black. There's a reason for that. And what does that mean? That America supported one set of parents but didn't support another set of parents, and we have to kind of think through what that means. So there is productive uh, guilt, but that's like a very specific kind of guilt. Most guilt's unproductive, right? So we need to and most shame is unproductive. Although, like I said, there's productive aspects of shame. We should be ashamed of letting Dianne Feinstein go brain dead in office, being a senator of 22 million people or 33 million people in California. Their one representative was half there. That we should be ashamed of that, and that should trigger a kind of reflection about how we never do that again, and what kind of institutions we should have to make sure that our representatives are actually representing in the right way. So there's a productive aspect of shame. I mean, one of the reasons Rock Bottom works with the 12-step program is because people feel ashamed when they hit
Yeah,
rock
that's
bottom.
for
They
sure.
can't do anything else. But we need to separate that from the unproductive aspects of shame, and a lot of performative white self-flagellation with their land acknowledgments and all of that doesn't actually change effective behavior and moving resources. It doesn't raise consciousness. It's just
Can I tell you a
puts
story
on
about that real
theater.
quick?
Yeah, what's up?
So in Aurora, where I live, there's a lady. Her name is Councilwoman Jurinsky, and she went off on the person who was suggesting that Aurora does land acknowledgement. And this is like 4 years ago. Then she happens to be Jewish and happens to be Zionist and very pro-Israeli. And in
Right.
her going off on the Department of DEI in Aurora, who was suggesting the land acknowledgement, she keeps going, okay, if I could, I would support this if you just say it's God's country. It's God's country, over and over again. Then, um, when Palestinian protesters come to city council to
Right.
talk about what's happening in Gaza, um, not only does she shut that down, but she takes a sabbatical to go and help Israel from a business perspective during the genocide as an Aurora. She's literally a city councilwoman in the most diverse city in Colorado with the largest
Yeah.
Muslim population, and
Right.
it's likely the election is tomorrow. It's likely she's going to get reelected. It just blows
Right.
my mind. And so we kind of touched on
Ah,
reparations. I'm hoping I give you the last word to talk about where you want to
ah.
go with reparations and electoral politics. Uh, and then I'm going to put resources in the link for people can go to thefunkyacademic.com to sign up and be a regular donor to your work so that you can keep putting out this thought.
Right, right. So before I alienate a good chunk of your audience, I'm going to tell you, if you appreciate what I'm saying, you should go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. Because now I'm going to say some things that, depending on who you talk to, could be considered anti-Semitic. Insofar as I don't think that all religions are the same. All religious commitments are the same with respect to what it takes to be part of a self-governing nation. If your religion comes with certain property claims, that's not the same as a religion that doesn't have those property claims. If your religion has certain like family claims, for example, that women need to do whatever their husband says, no matter what, and that incest is fine, that's not going to be okay with certain ethical claims in a self-governing nation. So not all religions are consistent with the conditions of democracy, are consistent with the conditions of, I think, the realization of freedom. Right.
So, are you
So
flattening each religion out though, or giving more weight within a tradition to the ultra orthodox, we'll say, or
right. So like there'll be like all different religions will have the more orthodox or less orthodox, or more like hegemonic and less hegemonic aspects, and more like consistent with freedom than inconsistent with freedom. For
within the
example, right
same
now
tradition?
I do think like Judaism has a Zionism problem, and like you can't really separate them that neatly as a lot of Zionists or as a lot of non-Zionist Jewish people will tell you, because I just know too many Jewish people who are Zionists because of their Judaism, and wouldn't be Zionists if they were any other like they're Zionists because of their Judaism. So like there's a way in which we need to talk about like what dual loyalty means for America.
Yes.
There's a way in which I can be loyal to ADOS, African-American descendants of slaves, because those are American, and I'm talking about pushing an American justice claim. But like I have a problem with people who use every aspect of their American power and American office to help Israel.
Yeah, it's a
They
foreign
use
nation.
every yeah, it's like it's sedition. It's you're using everything you can as an American. You're using all of the power you can in every American office you have. In every way, you're serving that to a foreign government. The IDF
And it's not
officer.
just Jewish people. There's right-wing evangelicals that believe in end times theology are doing it. And then you got like people like Randy Fine, who just came out with that bill about banning dual citizenship, which is just a really good psyop. I mean, he got on the Lower Loomer show to address it. Um, so Randy Fine's sponsoring a measure to get rid of dual citizenship. But what he's not doing is, like addressing the APAC was in, I think, Taiwan recently, or the APAC is considered an American
APAC's in
organization.
Taiwan?
Yeah, it was in the East doing some lobbying. I think it was with Taiwan.
Dude, they're not
So it's like,
lobbying on behalf of America. They're lobbying on behalf of Israel. They're in
exactly,
Taiwan,
that's my point.
Like, it's an
So, like,
Israeli lobbying firm, which is fine if we call it an Israeli lobbying firm. I can treat it as an Israeli lobbying firm.
when in doubt, state the obvious.
Yeah, like we should treat it like we treat the CCP lobbying firm for the Chinese Communist Party.
Or
Like,
the Qatari lobbying firm. They should all be the
yeah,
same.
that's fine. It's like it's just, let's not pretend that it's American, because it's not American. It's Israeli, and like those are two different nations. I'm a citizen of United. Like this is my nation. I am not Israel, and I don't like my politicians being like taking, the IDF phone call before they take mine, and feeling more beholden to them than
I
they
don't see
are
anything
to me.
anti-Semitic in that, personally.
Yeah, like so, like we need to understand that it's not just an affiliation. When American Zionists are using all of their official power,
Right.
like if she could use her councilwoman power for the benefit of Israel, she would. Like, like if she could use her business power for the benefit of Israel, she would. Like, it's not just like treating it as a different nation. It conforms their identity as Americans. Like Ellison and Barry Wise, like they are using Paramount to spread Israel propaganda. And I like Batia Andrukas Sargon. Batia, I've had her on my show.
She's more intellectual than a lot of people. She gets
She's
into
what?
good, more intellectual than a lot of people. She actually thinks
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
deeply.
and you know what? On a personal level, she's really charming.
Yeah,
She's
I've
like the
heard
most
that.
charming fascist I know. Like she is a whole fascist and Zionist, and like in the worst way. But like you like
Same
she's
reason people love
really.
Charlie Kirk, right? Like interpersonally, apparently he was super friendly.
I've never met like, and I know a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like Batia is charming. She is really charming for a fascist, and and she's like not even a half fascist either.
Oh wow.
Um, like yeah, no, she's like she's a whole problem, but like a lovely human in
Compare her
terms of like
fascism to Nick Fuentes. Equal?
yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, well, I don't even think. I think Fuentes is funny, and I think he's charismatic. But like, I think in person you would be a little bit grossed out by him.
Oh, okay.
And he's got like Batya. I like I can't not like her when I'm talking to her. I can't I can't. She's just too funny. She I can't. But like I'm always aware that she has a whole problem like with respect to justice. But I appreciate her presence so much. Just like when she's in the room or when I'm talking to her.
So
It's really something
she's
special.
who they should be sending out instead of what's that rabbi that's always just making a butt of himself?
Oh, Shmuley? Yeah,
Shmuley, yeah,
yeah,
Shmuley. I
yeah.
don't understand why Shmuley gets the airtime he does. I feel like
I
he's
don't know.
actually probably on the side against Israel for the,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. So the problem with that kind of religion in the United States is that it's not just a religious identity where it's between you and your divine and other believers. It makes land claims. It
yeah,
makes not weird family claims. Like you're now beholden, you have to raise a Zionist.
mm,
Like it makes you're supposed to send your kid out to birthright in a way that's different than sending your kid out to the Boy Scouts. Like it makes strange. You're not just tithing to the temple or whatever. You're giving money to Israel or giving money to politicians to give money to Israel. So it makes more architectonic claims conforming your life and your public life as a colleague of mine and member of the United States towards Israel in a way that I feel like is gross.
yeah.
And we need to admit that that's what's happening with a lot of American Zionists. And, I think, I think that American Judaism has a Zionism problem. Just like American
Absolutely. I think so
LDS
too.
had a racism problem, and
Hmm.
this isn't going to be something that I can fix outside of the religion. It's going to be other Jews that have to do it because part of the Zionism problem is they don't have to listen to non-Jews, right? So, it's gonna have to be like other Jews that fix, um, that make American Judaism consistent with American values. In the same way that Mamdani is articulating an American Muslim identity that's consistent and upholds American values.
It's a lot to say there because one of the things that I always struggle with, like I did interfaith for a decade of time,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of rabbis who are Zionist and they're on the liberal Zionist side and they're very convincing and charming too. Um, and I remember the stress I was under as a Muslim right after 9/11. I ran the Council on American Islamic Relations chapter in Houston, the fourth largest city in
Right.
America. 6 months after 9/11, I was the executive director of essentially our NAACP. Um, and I remember the constant pressure to be condemning terrorism. And I would go to media interviews with like 30 pages print out of condemnations from, like religious scholars to activist groups. And,
Right.
um, now that this genocide happens, you never hear, anyone asking Jewish people how they feel about it. And it feels like a just
Oh,
total
that's actually that's I never thought about it. Nobody ever says, as a Jew, how do you feel about your genocide? And expecting them to say, well, I have to condemn the genocide. And not just Netanyahu. Because like the problem isn't Netanyahu. You do opinion
it's Smotrich,
polls.
it's the whole, yeah.
You do opinion polls. They like their genocide over there. like,
At
like
least
there's a
50%
cultural
of them have
disease.
openly said so. Yeah,
They
in
like
Israeli
their
media.
genocide.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And because I was the victim of it, I don't want them to have to prove that to me because I
right.
remember having to prove it myself. And I even wrote this article that said, like, it says more about you for you to expect me to like have to restore my humanity than it says about me. So like I'm not calling for that in any way, shape, or form, but it's an
Right,
interesting phenomenon. To me, it demonstrates a power imbalance.
right.
Um,
And assumed. Hey, by the way, as a Houston Muslim, what do you think
mhm.
of Mo?
Mo Amer?
Mo. No,
Yeah, I
Mo
love him to death. The comedian.
the comedian. Yeah, yeah. Didn't he have a Netflix? I watched a Netflix show
Yeah,
that
I
I
love
kind
him
of
to death,
amused.
man. I got a funny story about that. Dave
Is he a
Chappelle
guy? Is
told,
he like? Is he known in the? Is he known in H
yeah,
Town?
he does local shows in Houston. He actually, before he really blew up and got huge, he's done comedy shows for events that I would put on before.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So you know
back
him,
in
know him.
the Allah made me funny. I consider him a friend. I don't know if he
Yeah,
remembers me anymore or
yeah,
not. You
yeah.
know, he's big time now. But no, he's fantastic. Have you seen the show, the
I
episode?
saw the show and I was like, okay.
Season
So
two was had me all up in the feels, man.
good. Yeah. Well, just like there was I think it had 2 seasons, right? It's
Yeah,
two
yeah.
seasons. All right.
The second
So
season's
just
phenomenal.
like the cutaway for the second season, where it's like a year later and he's just stranded in Mexico for a
Yes.
year. It's just like, and that's just like, well, sometimes life's like that. I was like, that's just what it's like to be on someone else's like world. Like you're
Yep.
on their timeline, and like it's just like, well, I'm stranded in Mexico now for a year. That's just how it goes.
This
And
might be.
so
Go ahead.
I think he's doing good work
Yes.
for so
Normalizing and humanizing
so you have to
Muslims.
understand the Zionists have like 70 shows like that. Low key humanizing American Jewish and Zionist life in the way that like black people, like the ones we have are only greenlit because like they're okay with people who aren't black. And like, so I don't know. So you think that like Mo's show was actually like good for the culture?
Absolutely.
Good.
So
Okay.
there's a lot. So like for instance, I tend to be a little socially conservative because of my faith, and I take my
Right.
values from what Islam teaches. So like I have some very stark disagreements with things that Mandani's done, that Mo does,
Right.
but at the end of the day, I also need to separate myself and look at the overall impact, right?
It's
And
good for the culture. There are
right,
lots of
what's
different
good
kinds of Muslims. We have to
exactly.
allow for lots of different kinds of Muslims. He's not my kind of Muslim in that way, but like it's not doing damage. It's actually like fleshing out the
Even
story.
more importantly, the fact that American Muslims, like you said about black people, they're American. They're not going
Right.
anywhere. And I firmly believe the American Muslim community is the quintessential First Amendment community.
Right.
And I feel
Yes.
like because everything about us is protected by the First Amendment. And what this does is it gives us this unique opportunity that I don't think any other community has ever had in the history of America. If American Muslims were to wrap themselves up in the Bill of Rights and especially the First Amendment, all of our advocacy helps every other human being on the shores of America. Because if we are protecting the First Amendment, we benefit black people, we benefit Sikhs, we benefit Hindus, we benefit Jews, because all we're doing is strengthening the separation of church and state and then strengthening the right of everyone to worship. So to
We
me,
are a First Amendment people because without it,
we can't practice our religion.
we can't practice our religion.
So when we advocate for our religious
And we're in a
rights,
hostile nation, so we need to rely on it.
yes, and
We're
so
in a
when we
hostile.
advocate for our religious rights, we advocate for something that helps every other community because in the First Amendment, the right to petition your government, the right to free assembly, all of the things that the secret sauce of what could make America be America
Right.
is all right there.
Is all
So
right there.
like the
And is
whole
always threatened if you're a Muslim American. All of those
yes,
things are like you're on the precipice.
exactly.
And it's a good place for advocacy because the call for prayer in Dearborn
Mhm.
is actually an interesting thing because we're okay with church bells on Sunday
Right.
as just part of the and you know if you really care about like localism and federalism and states' rights and like
Or
then
local
the
control,
people
yeah.
of Dearborn should
Mhm.
be able to decide whether they want a call to prayer. And if they have the votes in the city council to have the call to prayer, like that should be fine. That's to have an ordinance where it's not a big deal, then that should be up to the people of Dearborn. And
And
so
the
that's like
people, the anti-Muslim bigots who attack our community relentlessly, they show their full back end. There's a saying in Saudi Arabia that an imam just taught me yesterday. it's kind of like a hood saying, he has his full, backside out. It said that it's a guy with a giant mirror behind him who only has, the front covered, and he thinks no one can
Right.
see him. That's how the saying goes. And
Okay.
the Muslim haters that are in America, I don't use the word Islamophobia because
Huh.
it dehumanizes Muslims. It puts the religion on the test instead of the human being. So you attack the
Right. The
religion, the
Muslim
human
haters.
being bears the brunt of it. And then it also makes us feel like the Borg from Star Trek, like we don't have diversity of thought or race or anything else. Um, so I use anti-Muslim hate, but the people on the right who are anti-Muslim haters always talk about states' rights, right? When it's convenient for them. They always talk
Right.
about religious persecution of Christians when it's convenient for them. But then they'll do the exact same things they say they're against for them, against our community. So again, Muslims leading a First Amendment charge for all Americans would also be the biggest exposer of the hypocrisy of the people who hate us, and should help us all kind of rally towards this one sort of movement to fight back against oligarchy and all of this stuff that's plaguing America right now.
Yeah. No, I never really thought of it as like so central to both the Muslim identity, the First American, and it's a condition for like Muslim life, the First Amendment, and also like so central to like some of the problems, like the problems of self-governance in the United States. And it could be like, this is our thing. Like
Exactly.
we are a First Amendment people because because without it, like we're
Done for.
toast.
We're toast. Yeah,
We're done
cooked.
for. This nation is only for us by right. It's not for us by by culture. Like,
And it just
it's for
happens
us-
to be the people who hate Muslims statistically are the people who are anti-Semites who hate Jews, and also the people who oppress Black and brown folks. So
Right.
if you were to able to say, if like every community looked at the American Muslim community as an ally, we could be the tip of the spear on fighting Christian
Yeah.
nationalism and white supremacy.
Yeah, like look, if you
We already are. We just don't. We're not sharp
we just
because
don't
we're not.
acknowledge-
We're not working.
It's not self-reflective. It's not like, yeah, because like if you secure Muslims' right to raise their family as they should, that's consistent with America. If you secure a Muslim's right to do business as they want to, if you secure their right to worship as they want to, including a call of prayer. By the time you've secured the Muslim way of life in America, and you've secured that by right, and those rights are universal, you've secured everyone else.
Exactly.
And because like America's so hostile to all of those things that it would have had to like secure everyone else for that.
And this is why I was
Yeah,
saying
no.
earlier, if I could be in charge of American Muslim politics, my number one issue would be reparations. My number two issue would be strengthening the First Amendment. And my number three issue would be a digital Bill of Rights to kind of put ethics and limits on the rapid encroachment of AI in our lives.
Technology is a whole.
We need a second
mean-
conversation for that one.
Yeah, there's a second. That's a second conversation. But one of the reasons why I am so pro-family is I think family is going to be the only protector of the young.
And that makes
like,
you a
the
natural
nation.
ally. Every Muslim
Yeah.
conference for the last 20 years has always centered about strengthening the family. All of our religious, like Billy Graham style retreats, that's always
Right.
always been.
Yeah, because it's the only prophylactic against some of the like more pernicious aspects of American culture. And now the pernicious aspects are really pernicious.
Yes.
So if your family is not intact, like you're doing weed and like buying lotto, so that's what's going on. All right, thank you for your time. This
Thank
has
you.
been great. Can you take us out?
I'm going to have everybody go to thefunkyacademic.com, sign up for his videos on YouTube and other places, and become a donor there and support me on Patreon. Thank you, everyone, for your time. May God bless you and make the rest of your week fantastic.
Thank you.
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway, convert to Islam, defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, the more sophisticated approach